There are moments in history when truth seems to vanish, swallowed by the fog between myth and evidence. The sea, that vast shifting mirror of the sky, has always been one of those places where reality and legend overlap. Beneath its surface lie thousands of forgotten hulls, sealed in silence, while above, stories drift like ghosts in the mist. Phantom vessels still sailing, compasses spinning without reason, crews vanishing into air so thick with salt it feels alive. The world has always called these stories ghost ships. But what if they are not ghosts at all? What if they are messages, fragments of an older pattern, evidence of something deeper, repeating across centuries and continents? From the frozen coastlines of Alaska to the black waters of the Bermuda Triangle, from the myth of the Flying Dutchman to the cold precision of modern radar, one question remains unchanged. Where do the lost go when the sea decides to keep them? This is not just a collection of shipwrecks, it's a record of disappearance, of human belief meeting the unknown. We will follow the clues buried in these vanished voyages, and maybe, somewhere amid the wreckage and reflection, glimpse the truth about the ocean's long memory. Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The story begins not in a storm, but in silence, a gray horizon where the sea and sky dissolve into each other. Somewhere out there, a ship drifts without a crew, its paint peeled by decades of wind, its decks bleached by salt and sun. Fishermen call it cursed. Historians call it lost. But sailors who have seen it whisper a different name, the SS Baychimo. Built in 1914 in Hamburg, she began as an ordinary cargo vessel, her iron hull and steam engine symbols of a confident industrial age. She carried fur pelts and supplies between Scotland, Siberia, and the Arctic territories. Her course traced the northern veins of commerce, cold, perilous, but vital. For 16 years, she was loyal to her purpose. Then, in October of 1931, the sea decided otherwise. It started with ice. Sheets of it stretched endlessly across the Alaskan coast, glinting beneath a weak sun. The Baychimo's propeller struggled, each turn echoing like a heartbeat fading in the cold. When the ship froze in place, the crew believed it was temporary. They built shelters from tarpaulin and broken planks, waiting for the thaw. Some left for safety. 15 stayed behind, unwilling to abandon a vessel worth nearly $60,000 in cargo. Weeks passed, the ice thickened, and the sky grew cruel. Then came the blizzard. The world turned white. When it ended, the ship was gone. The ice plain remained, smooth and silent, but the Baychimo had vanished, lifted, as some swore, by the storm itself. Days later, a hunter spotted a dark silhouette drifting near the horizon. It was her. Against all logic, the Baychimo had freed herself and continued sailing, crewless, through the Arctic mists. From that moment, her transformation began, from ship to legend. Over the next 3 decades, she would appear and disappear like a ghost, moving with the currents between Alaska and the Beaufort Sea. Prospectors, trappers, and even rescue expeditions tried to board her. Some succeeded briefly, claiming they found her hull shattered but her spirit unbroken. Others vanished themselves, swallowed by the same merciless waters. The Baychimo's last confirmed sighting was in 1969, 38 years after she had been abandoned. Imagine that. A ship surviving longer without people than most ships do with them. The scientists call such vessels derelicts, abandoned ships still afloat, carried by wind and tide. But the word feels too small for what the Baychimo became. To the Inupiat hunters who glimpsed her through the fog, she was the ghost that wouldn't sink. Some said she was trapped in a loop, reliving the moment she was freed from the ice. Others believed the Arctic itself had claimed her, using her hull as a vessel for its own will. In maritime lore, the line between mechanical and mythical is thin. The sea has a way of turning steel into memory. Yet the Baychimo was not alone in this strange fate. Across oceans, in warmer waters, other ships shared her silent wandering. The Mary Celeste in 1872 found adrift in the Atlantic with its cargo untouched, dinner set neatly on the table, and no sign of the crew. The logbook ended mid-sentence. The Urang Medan, said to have been found near Indonesia in 1948, its entire crew frozen in horror, eyes wide, mouths open as if screaming into eternity. No smoke, no damage, no clue, just a radio signal that ended with the words, "I die." Whether that ship truly existed or not remains disputed, but the fear it inspired was real. The ocean's graveyard is vast, and its tombstones rarely bear names. Every culture has a way of explaining such things. To Dutch sailors in the 17th century, the answer was the Flying Dutchman, a ship condemned to sail forever, cursed by a captain who defied God and refused to turn back from a storm. It is said that anyone who sees the Dutchman is doomed. To scientists, these ghostly apparitions can be explained by a phenomenon called fata morgana, an atmospheric mirage that bends light, making distant ships appear to hover or glow. A trick of temperature, they say, where layers of warm and cold air twist vision itself. But sometimes the illusions are too precise, too detailed, too impossibly real. Can light alone conjure the creak of ropes and the glint of a nameplate? Or is there something else? Something that memory itself projects onto the waves? What makes the Baychimo so haunting is not only her longevity, but what she represents. The endurance of mystery in an age obsessed with explanation. In 2006, the Alaskan government even launched an expedition to locate her wreck, armed with sonar, submersibles, and satellite mapping. Nothing. Not a rivet, not a shadow. As if she had never existed, or as if she had simply decided to keep moving deeper into the ice. Maybe the Arctic did take her, folding her into its shifting white corridors, turning her into one more secret beneath the permafrost. But there's another interpretation, quieter and far more human. Perhaps the Baychimo survived because she refused to obey the same rule her builders believed in, that a ship is only alive when commanded. Left to her own devices, she became something else, a wandering monument to forgotten endurance. In that sense, she is not just a ghost. She is a reminder that human creation does not always die with human absence. Sometimes it keeps going, untethered, remembering the path long after its makers have been swallowed by time. To sail in northern waters is to enter a world of paradox. The ice looks solid but moves like breath. The horizon seems fixed but slides away as you approach. Compass needles jitter, and sound travels in strange arcs. A person standing on the deck of a ship can watch the world bend around them and begin to understand why so many ghost stories are born from the sea. It isn't only fear, it's reverence. The recognition that this element, for all our engines and radars, still belongs to itself. And maybe that is why, when the Baychimo drifted past the lonely whaling stations of Alaska, people didn't chase her for salvage. They watched in silence, as though intruding might break some unspoken law. Some said they heard music from her hull when the wind was right, a low metallic hum like the sound of breath through a shell. Others swore her decks were covered in frost, but her nameplate gleamed clean, as if freshly polished. To see her was to see a ghost, yes, but also a mirror of everything the sea takes and gives back in distorted form. Every age rediscovers the Baychimo in a new guise. In the age of exploration, she would have been a warning. In the age of empire, a curiosity. Now, in the digital age, she is a metaphor, a viral image of what refuses to vanish even when forgotten. The Arctic project that tried to find her called it a search for closure. But the sea doesn't believe in closure. It believes in cycles. Ships sink, ice melts, legends resurface. The Baychimo's logbook ended in a storm. Her story never did. If you were to stand today on the frozen edge of the Beaufort Sea, with the wind cutting through your coat and the world reduced to white and gray, you might hear a sound in the distance. A faint rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, carried through the fog. It could be the ice cracking, or it could be the echo of a steel hull, still drifting somewhere between myth and history. And maybe, just maybe, if you looked long enough into that mist, you would see a shape on the horizon, a black silhouette moving slowly against the impossible cold. You would know it at once, the same way the old sailors did. And as you watched it pass, leaving no wake, you might finally understand what they meant when they called her the ship that refused to die. Because sometimes history doesn't sink. It drifts, waiting for us to find it again. The ocean remembers everything, every keel that cut its surface, every voice that begged it for mercy. It has no need to keep records. The salt preserves its stories. Some of them resurface in fragments, washed up on the shore, mistaken for myths. Others return whole, like the tale of the Mary Celeste. Her name drifts through history like a whisper, half believed, half forgotten, a symbol of humanity's endless struggle to explain the unexplainable. She was a brigantine, built in 1861 and christened Amazon before a series of misfortunes forced her to be renamed. An act sailors have always considered bad luck. A change of name, they say, confuses the spirits that guard a vessel. The Mary Celeste seemed to bear that curse. She collided, she was refitted, and then she was sold again. In 1872, under Captain Benjamin Briggs, a devout man, respected, with a young wife and daughter aboard, she set out from New York for Genoa, carrying 1,100 barrels of industrial alcohol. It was meant to be a straightforward voyage across the Atlantic. It became one of the greatest enigmas in maritime history. 10 days later, the Dei Gratia, a British ship following a similar route, spotted her near the Azores. The sails were flapping loosely in the wind. No one was at the helm. No one answered the signals. When Captain David Morehouse and his crew boarded her, they found the ship eerily intact. The cargo was untouched. The personal belongings of the crew remained neatly arranged. Food, water, and supplies were still there. Enough for 6 months. Only one lifeboat was missing. The last entry in the logbook was dated 10 days earlier. The handwriting was steady, routine, describing mild weather. There were no signs of panic, no evidence of violence, just emptiness. Theories multiplied like barnacles. Some claimed pirates had attacked, though there was no theft or damage. Others believed the crew mutinied, yet left all valuables behind. A few even suggested that Captain Briggs, driven mad by invisible fumes from the alcohol cargo, abandoned ship in confusion. The simplest theory is that water had leaked into the hold, and Briggs, misreading the danger, ordered evacuation to the lifeboat, only for it to be lost in the waves. But the truth, like the ocean itself, refuses to stay still. What haunts people about the Mary Celeste isn't the loss of her crew, it's the absence of any human trace. The decks were too quiet, too clean. It's as if everyone aboard had simply dissolved into air. Sailors have long believed that the sea can take a soul without leaving a mark. They speak of phantom winds, of whispers rising from the foam, of shadows walking the decks at night. When a ship is found intact but deserted, it feels less like tragedy and more like a message. The Mary Celeste became that message, a reminder that even in the age of iron and steam, mystery still ruled the waters. The court hearings that followed were as strange as the disappearance itself. The rescuing crew of the Dei Gratia were accused of staging the whole thing for profit. The judges, unable to accept the supernatural, preferred conspiracy over mystery. But no evidence ever surfaced. Captain Morehouse died defending his integrity. Captain Briggs and his family were never found. The Mary Celeste continued to sail, sold again and again, carrying its reputation like a shadow. Sailors said she was cursed, that no captain who commanded her would find peace. Eventually, she was deliberately wrecked on a reef by her final owner in an attempt to claim insurance money. But even in ruin, the story refused to die. The name became shorthand for any ghost ship, any vessel that comes back without its people. Yet the Mary Celeste was just one chapter in a longer pattern, a thread connecting centuries of vanishing ships, each leaving the same unanswered question. How can a vessel survive without those who gave it purpose? The SS Baychimo drifted for decades through Arctic ice. The Orang Medan was found adrift with its entire crew dead, their faces twisted in terror, as if they'd seen something beyond comprehension. And then there was the Jenny, discovered frozen solid in Antarctic waters, her captain still seated at his desk, pen in hand, logbook open to the final line. May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. The handwriting stopped mid-stroke, as though the ocean itself had taken over the sentence. The authenticity of the Jenny is debated. Some scholars insist it never existed, that the story was a literary invention passed off as truth. But that doesn't matter. Whether real or imagined, it reflects a deeper truth about human fear. The idea of freezing in time, of being preserved by the very element that kills you, is almost mythological. Ice becomes both tomb and memory, keeping the dead upright as if waiting for judgment. When we talk about ghost ships, what we're really talking about is time. Time interrupted, suspended, or erased. A ship is a moving world, a closed system of breath and labor. When it stops, that small world collapses. And in the emptiness that follows, we project our own ghosts. That's why the legends endure. They are not just about lost sailors. They are about us, the living, trying to imagine what it means to vanish completely and yet leave something behind that still floats. There's a haunting symmetry between the Mary Celeste and other mysterious disappearances. The SS Arctic, for instance. She was one of the fastest and most luxurious steamships of her day, launched in 1850 as the pride of American engineering. But on a foggy September day in 1854, she collided with a smaller French steamer, the Vesta. The Arctic's captain, confident in the superiority of his larger ship, ordered full speed ahead, assuming the smaller vessel would sink first. He was wrong. The Vesta stayed afloat. The Arctic's hull, weakened below the waterline, flooded rapidly. Panic broke out. Only 6 lifeboats were available, enough for a fraction of those aboard. The crew abandoned their posts. Women and children were left behind. When rescuers arrived, they found only 85 survivors out of nearly 400. It was one of the earliest maritime disasters to be broadcast globally, but what lingered wasn't just the tragedy. It was the moral failure. The sea, indifferent as ever, had exposed human selfishness as clearly as it swallowed steel. Afterward, newspapers called for reform, more lifeboats, stricter safety laws, but nothing changed. It took 60 years and another unsinkable ship, the Titanic, to finally force the world to listen. Between them stretched a chain of forgotten wrecks, the Sultana in 1865, carrying 2,000 people on a single overloaded riverboat when her boiler exploded, killing almost everyone on board. The Dona Paz in 1987, when a Philippine ferry collided with an oil tanker, engulfing both ships in fire. The Jula in 2002, a Senegalese ferry capsizing under the weight of its own greed. Each was a ghost ship in its own way, not because it reappeared, but because its victims were never truly gone. They linger in water, in headlines, in the memories of those who read about them and imagine the moment before the end. The ocean doesn't distinguish between tragedy and legend. To it, a ship is just an object returning to its elements. The rest is human storytelling, our attempt to make meaning out of chaos. Still, every wreck adds another layer to that storytelling. The Mary Celeste gives us silence. The Arctic gives us moral failure. The Baychimo gives us endurance. Together they form a kind of map, not of geography, but of the human psyche. Even modern technology hasn't erased the feeling. Satellites can trace every movement across the planet, yet ships still vanish. In 2018, the Samratulangi PB-1600, a cargo vessel built in Indonesia, was found drifting off the coast of Myanmar, empty. The ship had been missing for nearly a decade. The paint was rusted, the deck overgrown with barnacles. Inside were clothes, notebooks, food supplies, all signs of a life interrupted. Authorities discovered 2 broken tow ropes, suggesting it had once been under tow before being released during a storm. But the mystery remained. How did it stay afloat for 9 years? Who had tried to move it? And why did they abandon it? The incident echoed the Baychimo, as if the sea were repeating an old story in a new century. In both cases, no one saw the ship sink. They simply stopped looking. That's the cruel beauty of the ocean. It doesn't bury, it erases. There are no gravestones, no ruins, only the surface, closing again and again over everything that falls beneath it. But maybe that's why ghost ships fascinate us so deeply. They are the exceptions, the few times the sea gives something back. A drifting hull is proof that something survived the storm, even if it's not what we hoped for. It's the sea's way of saying, you can leave, but you can never truly escape me. The Mary Celeste, the Baychimo, the Samratulangi, they all return to remind us that disappearance isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's transformation. And if we listen closely, beneath the crash of waves and the hum of modern engines, we can still hear that low, impossible echo. the heartbeat of ships that should not exist but do. They remind us that the ocean is not empty. It's full of memory, full of ghosts. And sometimes those ghosts come back, not to haunt us, but to ask whether we ever really understood what it means to be lost. The ocean, for all its calm beauty, is a place built on betrayal. It gives you a horizon so infinite that you start to trust it, then takes everything back without warning. The sea is not cruel. It is indifferent. And in that indifference, thousands of ships have vanished as though swallowed by an ancient memory that refuses to be decoded. Perhaps the most infamous of these disappearances lie within a patch of water that has become almost myth itself, the Bermuda Triangle. For decades, sailors and pilots have entered it and never returned. Official maps refuse to mark it, yet everyone knows where it is. A phantom zone stretching roughly from Florida to Bermuda and Puerto Rico, a space where compasses spin, engines fail, and logic drowns. It's said that even Christopher Columbus experienced its strangeness. During his first voyage to the New World in 1492, his journal described a great flame falling from the sky into the sea and compasses that suddenly pointed away from true north. His crew grew restless, whispering about curses and signs. Today, scientists explain those compass anomalies as simple variations in magnetic fields. But the human mind has never been content with simple explanations. It's the why that keeps us awake, the unseen hand behind the event. The Bermuda Triangle's modern legend truly began in the 20th century, when technology should have made the ocean less mysterious. Instead, it only sharpened the edges of its fear. In December 1945, 5 U.S. Navy planes, Flight 19, took off from Fort Lauderdale for a routine training mission. The weather was clear, their instruments checked. 2 hours later, the pilots radioed in, confused and panicked. Their compasses were spinning wildly. They couldn't tell which way was west, which way was home. "Everything looks wrong," one of them said. "Even the ocean doesn't look as it should." Then silence. The search plane sent to find them also disappeared. 27 men gone, 6 aircraft erased, not a single piece of wreckage ever found. For the skeptics, it's a matter of bad navigation and weather. But for others, it's something deeper, a tear in the fabric of time, a doorway to somewhere else. The truth is that no human explanation ever feels big enough for such emptiness. When a plane or ship vanishes without a trace, it's as if the universe blinks and forgets what it was doing. Theories about the triangle are as endless as the ocean itself. Some say methane gas erupting from the seafloor forms bubbles that reduce water density, causing ships to sink instantly, leaving no trace. Others speak of rogue waves, walls of water 100 feet tall, rising out of calm seas and devouring everything in their path. Scientists can prove those waves exist, but not why they always seem to appear here. Then there are the believers in the extraordinary, those who claim the triangle is a thin place between worlds, an ancient portal powered by magnetic anomalies or remnants of a lost civilization. Atlantis. Charles Berlitz, a linguist and author, popularized that idea in the 1970s. He claimed that the Bermuda Triangle's strange energies came from crystal devices once used by the Atlanteans, machines still buried under the ocean floor, pulsing with forgotten power. It sounds absurd, yet his book sold over 20 million copies, because in every absurdity lies a kind of hope that our world, so mapped and measured, still has places that refuse to be conquered. And indeed, the disappearances don't stop with Flight 19. In 1918, the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy collier carrying over 300 men, vanished somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore. The weather was calm. No SOS, no debris. It remains the single largest loss of life in U.S. naval history outside wartime. When the Navy investigated, they concluded simply, "The ship and crew have disappeared without a trace." A phrase that might as well have been carved into the triangle itself. Then there's the story of the Ellen Austin, a merchant ship sailing through the area in 1881. She came across a derelict vessel, seemingly intact, but eerily silent. The captain sent a crew to man it and sail alongside. For 2 days, the ships traveled together until a storm separated them. When the weather cleared, the ghost ship was gone. Weeks later, the Ellen Austin found it again, still adrift. But the new crew had vanished, leaving the ship as empty as before. They tried once more, sending another team aboard. And again it disappeared, only to reappear days later with no one alive. Some called it bad luck, others called it cursed possession. Either way, the pattern was unmistakable. Things enter this part of the world and simply stop belonging to it. The scientific mind can't stand such stories. It looks for causes: malfunctioning equipment, unpredictable weather, human error. But even with data, the unease remains. Pilots describe sudden clouds forming out of clear skies, swallowing the horizon in seconds. Radar operators report echoes that move against the wind, reflections of aircraft that aren't there. Sometimes the problem isn't that the sea takes things away. It's that it gives them back changed. In 2015, 2 teenagers vanished off the Florida coast after sailing into a line of thunderstorms. For months, their families searched the seas. Nothing. Then, a year later, their boat was found adrift near Bermuda. Inside were 2 phones, a tangled fishing line, and a silence so complete it felt staged. Modern navigation, satellite tracking, weather forecasting. None of it could answer the oldest question of all. What happens when the ocean decides to forget you? Some researchers suggest the Bermuda Triangle is not unique. It's one of 12 vile vortices, a term coined by biologist Ivan T. Sanderson, zones around the globe where gravitational or magnetic forces behave strangely. They form a geometric pattern across the Earth. The Dragon's Triangle near Japan, the Algerian megalith triangle in the Sahara, the South Atlantic anomaly off Brazil. Each shares the same story: disappearances, light anomalies, distortions of time. Sanderson believed they marked intersections of Earth's magnetic grid, places where the planet's energy twisted upon itself. He was mocked by the scientific community, yet decades later, satellites began confirming magnetic irregularities in those very regions. Still, it's not the anomalies that fascinate people. It's the idea that something ancient might dwell behind them. Japanese fishermen call their vortex the Dragon's Sea. Local myths speak of dragons rising from the water to claim ships. Modern geologists talk instead about methane bursts and underwater volcanoes, but the symbolism remains the same. Something alive beneath, shifting, waiting. To understand the allure of these places, you have to think like a sailor. Imagine being surrounded by horizon on all sides, no land, no reference, only the compass in your hand and the sound of the wind. Then imagine that compass starting to spin. The human mind fills that void with anything it can: gods, monsters, equations. Each theory is a lifeboat. Some float, others sink. In the end, the Bermuda Triangle is both a mystery and a mirror. It reflects our fear of the unknown and our desire to give it shape. The truth may be dull, a mixture of natural hazards and human mistakes, but the story is not. Because when the sea erases a ship, it erases people too, their faces, their laughter, their futures. And into that vacuum, we pour myth. We call it a curse because we need to believe someone or something is responsible. Even now, with GPS and satellites mapping every inch of the world, the triangle still takes what it wants. In 2023, a cargo plane carrying 3 crew members vanished off radar near its northern edge. No distress call. The sea was calm. Months later, a single wing was found, miles from where it should have been, edges smooth as if sanded by glass. Experts blamed a microburst. But to the families of the missing, words like microburst are just another way of saying, we don't know. The Bermuda Triangle endures because it is not really about navigation or physics. It's about faith. Faith that there are still mysteries left in a world we think we've mapped. Faith that maybe the ocean still hides the door to somewhere we can't yet imagine. Every time a ship vanishes, that faith grows stronger. And every time a piece of wreckage is found, it reminds us that even mysteries need evidence to survive. Late at night, when cargo captains cross that stretch of water, they still keep one eye on the radar, another on the horizon. Some place an old coin under the helm, a sailor's charm against bad luck. They'll laugh about it later, but in that moment, when the instruments flicker and the sea glows faintly beneath the moon, they remember every story they've ever heard. And somewhere deep inside, they know that for all our technology, we are still sailing blind. The Bermuda Triangle is not a place on a map. It's a wound in our understanding, a reminder that the sea, like time, cannot be fully measured. And perhaps that's the lesson hidden in all these vanished voyages, that progress does not mean control, and exploration does not guarantee return. The ocean, ancient and alive, still guards its secrets with the same patience it always has. So when people ask if the triangle is real, the answer is simple. Of course it is. Not as a region, but as an idea, as a symbol of everything we cannot explain and refuse to forget. It's where logic drowns and myth breathes again. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, a radar blip fades, a light disappears, and another ghost story begins. The sea closes over it like a secret, whispering to itself the same phrase it has whispered since the first ship set sail. Come closer and find out for yourself. There is a place where the desert meets the sea, where the bones of whales lie beside the rust of ships, and the wind howls through skeletons of steel. Sailors call it the end of the world. Cartographers once labeled it simply as uninhabitable. But for those who have seen it, it is unforgettable. The skeleton coast of Namibia, a 976-mile stretch of Atlantic shoreline where time itself seems to decay. The Bushmen of the Namib Desert used to say that this coast was made when God was angry. Portuguese explorers who reached it in the 15th century believed it was the gateway to hell. To the sea, though, it's just another page in its long book of wrecks. The skeleton coast is the graveyard of ships. More than 500 vessels rest here, half buried in dunes or broken into shards by the surf. Wooden galleons, steam trawlers, oil tankers, all reduced to bones. The Benguela current that hugs this coastline moves northward with icy precision, dragging fog and cold water from the Antarctic. It's one of the richest marine currents on Earth, dense with life, but also deadly for sailors. The same upwelling that nourishes plankton blinds the sea with mist. From the deck of a ship, land seems to shimmer like a mirage until it's too late. Many captains believed they were miles offshore when they struck the sandbanks, and once the hull scraped the bottom, there was no return. The sea receded like a trickster, leaving them stranded in a desert of shifting dunes. Among the many tragedies scattered along this coast, the story of the Dunedin Star still echoes the loudest. In November 1942, during World War II, this British cargo liner was carrying supplies and passengers from Liverpool to Cape Town. The night it ran aground off Namibia was calm but deceptive. A hidden sandbar caught its hull, and the ship stopped dead. Efforts to free it failed, and waves soon began to batter its stern. The captain, Henry Morris, ordered everyone to abandon ship. Lifeboats overturned in the surf. Passengers, men, women, even children, washed ashore, terrified, surrounded by endless desert. Word of the disaster spread slowly. Rescue teams tried to reach them by land, but were thwarted by dunes as high as buildings. From the air, a South African Air Force pilot spotted the survivors and made the impossible choice to land on the beach, using the sand itself as a runway. He saved several people, but when another plane came to help, it crashed in the same spot. Weeks later, a tugboat sent to retrieve the remaining survivors also ran aground. The coast seemed to devour everything that dared approach. It took 2 months and countless sacrifices to bring everyone to safety. By the end, the Dunedin Star had vanished beneath the shifting sands. Its rusted bow still pokes through the dunes like a warning to anyone who forgets how unforgiving beauty can be. Even today, when the fog rolls in thick and silver at dawn, the wrecks appear and disappear like specters. Locals say you can hear their masts creaking in the wind or see lights moving among them, phantom crews searching for a shore they will never reach. It's not just ships that haunt the skeleton coast, but also animals. The bones that litter the beach aren't metaphors. They're real. Whale ribs the size of trees, skulls of seals, and carcasses of shipwrecked oxen tell a story of survival and failure. It's a place where nature records every mistake. If the Bermuda Triangle is the sea's invisible trap, the skeleton coast is its visible aftermath. It doesn't hide its victims beneath the waves. It displays them, fossilized in salt and sand. And unlike the Triangle's mysterious disappearances, the terror here is brutally simple. Exposure, thirst, isolation. Survivors of shipwrecks described walking for days through dunes so vast they seemed alive, their feet sinking into centuries of dust. Some went mad and walked back toward the ocean, convinced they saw water shimmering ahead. There was no water, only heat mirages dancing over bone-colored sand. Yet, within this harshness lies an odd kind of wonder. Out of what looks like death, life thrives. Jackals scavenge the beaches, hyenas patrol the dunes, lions, desert lions, leaner and more patient than their savanna cousins, wander the shoreline at dusk, drawn by the smell of seals. In the mornings, fog drifts in from the sea, coating everything in dew. Beetles climb to the crests of sand to drink droplets that gather on their shells. It's a ritual as old as time, the sea giving back just enough to let life continue. To understand the skeleton coast is to understand the paradox of the ocean. It destroys and sustains, erases and reveals. Archaeologists say that beneath its sands lie remnants of ancient trade routes, Roman coins, and pottery shards from lost civilizations. Explorers have unearthed human skeletons too, bleached white beside shipwrecks, their owners never identified. They are silent witnesses to a truth we keep forgetting. The Earth doesn't care about human boundaries. In recent years, a few tourists have been allowed to visit the Skeleton Coast under strict permits. They arrive by plane, circling above the dunes before landing on narrow strips of gravel. From the air, the coastline looks like the edge of another planet. Black waves crashing into gold dust, shipwrecks twisted into surreal sculptures. Some travelers describe it as beautiful. Others call it terrifying. But everyone agrees that standing there feels like standing at the intersection of myth and geology, where the world is stripped of its illusions. There are other coasts like this, scattered across the planet. Australia's Cape Tribulation, for instance, where tropical rainforests descend into coral seas filled with predators. The name was given by Captain James Cook after his ship struck a reef there in 1770. "Here began all our troubles," he wrote in his log. Even now, the name fits. The water looks like paradise, clear and turquoise, but beneath it lurk saltwater crocodiles and box jellyfish, creatures so venomous they can kill a person before they reach the shore. On land, wild boars roam the beaches, and the trees themselves can sting you. The stinging tree, covered in fine glass-like hairs, injects a venom that causes agony for weeks. Travelers call it nature's revenge. Both Cape Tribulation and the Skeleton Coast embody the same lesson, that beauty and danger are twin forces, inseparable. The Earth's most breathtaking places often carry the deepest scars. They remind us that exploration was never meant to be comfortable. Every step toward discovery has always been paid for in risk, sometimes in blood. The old sailors understood this. That's why they spoke to the sea as if it were a god, pleading, bargaining, apologizing. And perhaps they were right to do so. The skeletons scattered along Namibia's shore are not just remnants of shipwrecks. They are monuments to human defiance. Every vessel that set sail knew what awaited it, the possibility of never coming home. Yet they sailed anyway. The same is true today, though our ships are made of steel and our navigation runs on satellites. Somewhere, right now, a captain is staring into fog thicker than smoke, trusting a blinking screen more than his own eyes. And still, the ocean waits, patient as ever. Maybe that's what draws us to stories like the Skeleton Coast. It's not just fascination with death, it's fascination with persistence. The rusting hulls, the weathered bones, the dunes that bury and uncover them again. They all speak to the same truth. The world moves on, but it doesn't forget. Every gust of wind over that coast sounds like a page turning in a book too vast for us to read. At night, when the wind drops and the tide whispers against the sand, the place feels almost sacred. The air glows faintly with bioluminescent plankton washing ashore. The stars above the Namib Desert are so bright that they reflect off the wet dunes, making it seem as if the earth itself is glowing. It's easy to imagine, in that moment, the ghosts of sailors walking the shoreline, silent, weightless, watching the sea that both took and preserved them. The Skeleton Coast doesn't need myths of vanished ships or interdimensional rifts. Its horror is plain, its mystery physical. Yet it evokes the same emotion as the Bermuda Triangle or the legend of the Flying Dutchman. Awe. Because awe is the root of fear. To look upon something vast and beautiful and realize it could erase you in a heartbeat is the oldest terror we know. But it's also the source of our deepest respect. If you ever find yourself there, standing among the bones and wrecks, you will feel that paradox in your chest. a mixture of insignificance and connection. The sea stretches before you, endless and glittering, pretending to be calm. Behind you, the desert breathes heat like a furnace. Between them, you stand where no life should survive, and yet everything here endures. The ships, the dunes, the ghosts, they all tell the same story in different languages, that life and death are not opposites. They are parts of the same tide, flowing in and out, leaving behind what the next wave will reclaim. And when the wind rises again, and the fog returns, swallowing the horizon, the ocean will hide its treasures once more. Somewhere beneath that shifting mist, another ship may already be drifting toward the coast, its crew unaware that they are sailing toward legend. Perhaps, years from now, someone else will find its remains half buried in sand, and the sea will have written one more chapter in its endless book of loss. Because here, at the world's edge, nothing truly disappears. It only waits to be rediscovered. The sea doesn't just swallow ships. It keeps their stories like keepsakes. Some it erases completely, but others it preserves in cold, perfect silence, like a library of frozen time. One of those stories begins with the sound of cracking ice in the Weddell Sea, deep in Antarctica, where in 1915 a ship named Endurance met its fate. The ice closed around her hull like a fist. Her captain, Sir Ernest Shackleton, had set out to achieve the impossible, to make the first land crossing of the Antarctic continent. But the continent had other plans. For months, Endurance drifted, trapped in the frozen sea, slowly being crushed. When the pressure finally splintered her sides, Shackleton and his men abandoned ship, dragging lifeboats across miles of shifting ice in search of land. The ship sank, and for more than a century, no one saw her again. In 2022, an expedition found her, lying 2 miles beneath the surface, perfectly preserved by the freezing water. Her name was still visible, her timbers unrotted. It was as if the ocean had decided to keep her whole, a monument to human stubbornness. When the scientists filmed her with remote cameras, they described the experience as standing at the edge of a dream, the past staring back through the dark. Shackleton's ship had survived where humans could not. In her stillness, she told a story larger than failure. She told one of endurance, fittingly. But endurance was not alone in her icy tomb. In the Arctic, across half the world, explorers had met similar fates. The HMS Investigator, sent in 1850 to search for another lost expedition, became trapped in the ice of the Canadian North. Her crew spent 3 winters there, starving and frostbitten, before finally being rescued. When modern archaeologists discovered her in 2010, sitting upright in 36 feet of water, she was astonishingly intact. The Arctic's cold had preserved the wood as if time had paused. Around her lay the remains of human survival, utensils, boots, journals, proof of a people who had tried to outlast nature and nearly succeeded. There's something almost sacred about these frozen ships. Unlike wrecks at the bottom of tropical seas, where coral and currents reclaim everything, the cold preserves every detail, the ropes, the tools, even the grain of the wood. They are like frozen memories, fragments of defiance against the impossible. Scientists study them, but storytellers see something else, a confrontation between humanity's desire to conquer and nature's quiet refusal to yield. And yet, for all the discoveries beneath the ice, the most haunting finds sometimes come from dry land. In 2020, miners in eastern Serbia, digging through ancient riverbeds, uncovered the remains of 3 ships buried in clay. The largest, almost 50 feet long, dated back over 1,300 years. Archaeologists identified it as Roman, a flat-bottomed river vessel capable of carrying 30 soldiers. The other 2 were smaller, carved by the Slavs who once raided these same waters. The ships had been sealed by mud, frozen mid-escape, their wooden ribs marked with scars of repair. Above them, layers of earth told the story of an entire city, Viminacium, a Roman settlement larger than Pompeii, lost to time and coal dust. To stand among those ships was like walking into an echo. The air smelled of soil and age. Each plank carried the fingerprints of the men who built it, long before nations had names. Once, they sailed a river that no longer exists. Now they are evidence that history doesn't sink. It buries itself and waits for us to dig it up again. Still, perhaps the strangest of all discoveries are those that shouldn't exist at all. The Antikythera wreck, found off the coast of Greece in 1900, was just another ancient ship to the sponge divers who stumbled upon it. They dove for sponges and surfaced with bronze statues instead. Horses, warriors, the remains of art long forgotten. But among the treasures was something different. A lump of corroded metal that, when cleaned, revealed gears, dials, and inscriptions. For decades, no one understood what it was. Only in the 21st century did researchers realize they were looking at a machine, a mechanical computer built over 2,000 years ago, capable of predicting eclipses, planetary movements, even Olympic Games. They call it the Antikythera mechanism, and it has rewritten what we thought we knew about ancient technology. More complex than any known device for the next 1,000 years, it suggests that the Greeks understood the cosmos, not just through philosophy, but through engineering. How such sophistication was lost, and why it vanished for centuries, is another mystery. Perhaps it was destroyed in war, or perhaps the knowledge sank with the ship that carried it. Either way, it proves that the sea doesn't just hide wreckage, it hides civilization itself. Every discovery from the depths feels like a conversation with ghosts. The Antikythera divers, those who found the Roman ships, the scientists who filmed Endurance, they all describe the same feeling, awe mixed with dread. To look at something that should not have survived is to realize that human ambition is both fragile and eternal. We are always reaching, always sinking, always resurfacing. But even as archaeology pulls these relics from their graves, the ocean creates new ones. Modern ghost ships still appear, carried by currents that ignore borders. In 2020, off the coast of Ireland, villagers woke to find a 250-foot cargo vessel wedged against the rocks. The ship, called the Alta, had vanished years earlier in the Atlantic. Its crew had been rescued in 2018 when the engine failed during a hurricane, leaving the ship adrift. It floated unmanned for almost 2 years, through storms, across entire oceans, before grounding itself like a message in a bottle. When locals boarded it, they found food, clothes, and tools, all untouched, as though the crew had just stepped out. Authorities couldn't decide what to do with it. It was too dangerous to dismantle, too costly to tow, too empty to claim. So the sea made the choice instead. Within months, storms tore the Alta in two. One half sank into the sand, the other was carried out again, vanishing back into the Atlantic. It was a modern echo of the Baychimo, a reminder that technology hasn't made us immune to the ocean's games. We still lose control. We still vanish. Not all mysteries lie at sea. Some are buried in the edges of continents where human arrogance meets nature's patience. Take Sable Island, a thin, crescent-shaped strip of sand off the coast of Nova Scotia. It's called the Graveyard of the Atlantic. For 4 centuries, more than 350 ships have wrecked there, their remains half swallowed by dunes and fog. The island is beautiful. Horses graze wild, seals bask in sunlight, but beneath its charm lies death. Its fog is constant, its waters shallow, its currents deceptive. Before radar and sonar, sailors relied on celestial navigation, and Sable's endless mist made stars vanish. They drifted blindly, thinking they were miles away when they were moments from ruin. The first recorded wreck there was in 1583. Since then, it has claimed everyone from explorers to fishermen, from merchant fleets to private yachts. Yet, despite the danger, Sable Island also became a refuge. For centuries, it hosted a single human inhabitant, a naturalist named Zoe Lucas, who lived alone among the dunes, studying horses and gathering washed-up debris to track ocean pollution. She once said she never felt lonely. "The island breathes," she explained. Maybe she understood something the rest of us forget, that isolation isn't emptiness, it's presence in another form. All these places, the Arctic, the Mediterranean, Nova Scotia's fog, are connected by something deeper than water. They are stages where humanity and the elements perform the same play again and again. Curiosity versus oblivion. We build, we explore, we lose, we rediscover. Sometimes we find machines that predict the heavens. Sometimes we find bones in sand. But the script never changes. The sea waits, indifferent, for its next act. It's tempting to think of these wrecks as relics of the past, as proof that the world was once mysterious but no longer is. Yet the more we search, the more we realize the opposite. Every discovery opens another question. What ancient knowledge lies beneath the Black Sea? What forgotten civilizations were erased by floods, by ice, by shifting currents? And what will future explorers find when they dredge up the remains of our own age, our tankers, our cruise ships, our satellites that fall back to Earth? The ocean keeps all of it. It does not choose what to remember or forget. It simply holds. The endurance, frozen and perfect. The Antikythera mechanism, rusted but alive with meaning. The Alta, torn apart by storms. Each one a reflection of us, our ingenuity, our fragility, our refusal to stop moving even when the horizon warns us to turn back. One day, perhaps, another civilization will find what we left behind and wonder who we were. They will read our instruments, our journals, our steel, and they will say, "These people lived in a world they could not control, and yet they kept trying. They built machines to measure the stars, ships to cross the ends of the earth, stories to keep the darkness away." And maybe they will understand, as we do when we look at the wrecks of the past, that we were not simply explorers or victims. We were witnesses to the eternal conversation between humanity and the sea. And that conversation is not over. It never will be. Because as long as there are ships, there will be silence after storms, compasses that spin, and ghostly shapes gliding through fog. The ocean will go on collecting what we leave behind, building its invisible museum beneath the waves. And somewhere, deep in that dark cathedral of salt and pressure, the Endurance will still rest, her name shining faintly under the ice, proof that even when we lose everything, the story goes on. The deeper one dives into the sea's history, the more it begins to resemble a memory palace built from wreckage. Every fragment of wood or bone, every corroded nail or preserved shoe is like a neuron in a collective consciousness older than humanity. The ocean remembers everything, but in a language of pressure, silence, and decay. For centuries, we have tried to translate that language through stories, of vanished fleets, of glowing ships, of voices carried by waves. Yet perhaps the strangest of all are those that seem to exist between the boundaries of legend and archaeology, vessels that shouldn't exist, and yet somehow did. Take the story of the Octavius. In 1775, a whaling ship named the Herald spotted another vessel drifting aimlessly off Greenland. The sea was calm, the air frozen still. The Herald's crew hailed the ghost ship but received no reply. So they boarded. Inside, they found a scene so eerie that even the most hardened sailors hesitated to speak of it later. The entire crew of the Octavius was dead, perfectly preserved by the Arctic cold. At the captain's desk sat the master himself, pen still in hand, mid-sentence in the ship's log. The last entry was dated 1762, 13 years earlier. According to the log, the Octavius had attempted to traverse the fabled Northwest Passage and had become trapped in the ice. Her crew froze before they could escape. The ship, still sealed in her icy tomb, had drifted across the polar seas for more than a decade before being released to the open waters again. The authenticity of the tale has never been proven. Some historians dismiss it as maritime folklore, a story spread in port taverns to frighten green sailors. Yet the imagery endures, a ship of frozen souls, locked in a moment that refuses to end. It's not hard to see why it resonates. The Arctic is not merely cold, it's timeless. To die there is to become part of a still life, perfectly framed by the elements. And perhaps that's what terrifies us most. Not destruction, but preservation. Preservation, after all, is a strange kind of immortality. When the Endurance was found beneath the ice in 2022, its timbers looked almost new, her name shining gold against the blue dark. The ocean had not destroyed her, it had protected her. Similarly, when Soviet scientists discovered the remains of ancient mammoths in the Siberian permafrost, they found not skeletons but bodies, skin, muscle, even eyes intact after tens of thousands of years. The same process that froze the Octavius's crew might one day bring their likenesses back to us, captured by archaeologists who dig where time stands still. But what if the Octavius wasn't just legend? What if such ships are part of a recurring pattern, a phenomenon tied to the strange power of cold and isolation? Consider the Kurdish, a 19th-century Scottish ship that vanished in the Arctic and was later found empty, her decks coated in rime, her food supplies untouched. The lifeboats were still secured, the fire in the galley burnt out mid-meal. Or the Lyubov Orlova, a Soviet cruise ship that broke free from a Canadian harbor in 2013. For years, satellites tracked it drifting across the North Atlantic, its beacons flashing irregularly before it disappeared entirely. Experts speculated that it sank. Others claimed to have received faint distress signals long after it should have gone under. The tabloids nicknamed it the cannibal ghost ship, imagining rats devouring one another in the dark. Yet even stripped of fantasy, the image of an empty ship wandering the ocean for years is unsettling enough. To the rational mind, these are coincidences, mechanical failures, human errors, weather patterns. To the poet's mind, they are manifestations of something older, an oceanic instinct that reclaims its creations. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps the sea does not need intent to create mystery. Its scale alone ensures that somewhere, at every moment, something is vanishing while something else reappears. But not all ghostly vessels come from recent centuries. Off the coast of Japan, fishermen have long reported encounters with strange wooden craft, round, sealed, and bearing inscriptions in unknown languages. The first documented case appeared in 1803, when villagers from Hitachi province found one such drifting bowl washed ashore. Inside sat a pale woman with red hair, holding a small box she refused to let anyone touch. Her clothing was unfamiliar, her words incomprehensible. Terrified, the villagers pushed her vessel back out to sea. The event was recorded in government archives as the Utsuro Bune incident, the hollow ship. To modern eyes, it reads like early science fiction, a description of a capsule, perhaps even an artificial craft. Historians argue it was a foreign wreck, maybe Russian or British. Yet in the imagination of Japan's coastal people, it became something else entirely, a visitation, a glimpse of beings from another world. The Utsuro Bune connects with legends found elsewhere, those of luminous ships seen in the sky or the deep, of vessels that move against wind and tide as if propelled by thought. Ancient Chinese chronicles mention fireboats that emerged from the sea, leaving molten trails in their wake. Norse sagas describe Nokfi Draugr, ghost ships made of mist and death. Polynesian navigators speak of Waka Wairua, spirit canoes that sail the horizon before a storm. The imagery repeats across cultures and millennia. The sea as a threshold between worlds, ships as messengers from beyond. Even modern oceanographers, armed with instruments and data, sometimes speak of phenomena they cannot easily explain. Bioluminescent waves, for instance, can turn entire coastlines into rivers of liquid fire, visible from space, glowing blue like veins of the earth itself. Sailors once mistook these for supernatural omens. We now know they're caused by dinoflagellates, microscopic organisms that emit light when disturbed. Yet understanding the mechanism doesn't erase the feeling of awe. Standing on a deck surrounded by glowing waves, one can still believe the sea is alive in ways science hasn't yet measured. Every generation reinterprets the same mysteries. In the 19th century, ghost ships symbolized divine warning. In the 20th, they became metaphors for human hubris and technological failure. In the 21st, they embody something quieter: loneliness, abandonment, the haunting persistence of things left behind. When the Lyubov Orlova drifted, people joked about it online, called it the zombie ship. But beneath the irony lay fascination, the image of a vessel once filled with laughter and music, now wandering through storms without witness, touches something primal in us. It mirrors our fear of being forgotten, of continuing to move when purpose is gone. That fear is ancient. The Greeks told of Charon's boat, ferrying souls across the river Styx. The Egyptians buried their pharaohs with solar barges to carry them into eternity. In Norse mythology, the dead ride the Naglfar, a ship made from human nails, which will rise during Ragnarok to end the world. Across all these stories, the ship is both vessel and grave, a means of passage and a reminder of impermanence. The ocean, in this light, becomes the afterlife itself, vast and unknowable. Perhaps that's why ghost ships affect us so deeply. They aren't just maritime mysteries, they're metaphors for ourselves. A ship without a crew is a body without a soul. A compass spinning endlessly is a mind lost in memory. The endless drift is the human condition, movement without arrival. We are, each of us, adrift between what we remember and what we hope for. There is an account from 1968 that reads almost like an allegory. A Soviet research vessel, the Vityaz, exploring the Mariana Trench, recorded sonar echoes of what seemed to be a moving structure at a depth no submarine could survive. The pattern repeated for hours before fading. Scientists suggested it was a thermal current, or perhaps a school of deep-sea creatures. But in private correspondence, one of the technicians wrote, "It was as if something below was listening back." The ocean, they realized, wasn't just reflecting signals, it was responding. That moment captures the essence of our relationship with the sea. We send our machines, our ships, our stories into it, and sometimes something answers. The reply might be a wreck surfacing after a century, or a strange signal on sonar, or the whisper of a wave breaking against an empty hull. We never truly know what we're speaking to. And maybe that's what keeps us returning. Because to explore the ocean is to explore memory itself, vast, layered, and haunted by things that refuse to fade. Each ghost ship, each discovery beneath the ice or sand is a reminder that time doesn't move in a straight line out there. It loops, drifts, resurfaces, the Octavius frozen in eternal writing, the Utsurobune and its mysterious passenger, the Lyubov Orlova blinking through storms, the Endurance standing unbroken beneath the Antarctic night. They are all chapters in the same unfinished story, the sea's story, and ours within it. So when we hear of a ship found drifting, we listen with the same mixture of fear and reverence our ancestors felt. Because deep down, we know what it means. It means the conversation between humanity and the ocean is still ongoing. It means that somewhere out there, beyond radar and reason, the sea is still holding on to something we've forgotten, waiting, as it always does, to show us again what cannot die, only drift. The sea has always been humanity's greatest mirror. Every voyage into its depths reveals something about us, our courage, our ignorance, our desire to control what cannot be controlled. And among all the ocean's secrets, none have haunted modern history quite like those found beneath the Pacific and Indian Oceans, where whole vessels from the age of empire, war, and discovery now lie entombed in silence. Each one tells a story not just of loss, but of transformation, the moment when technology and ambition met the ancient, indifferent will of the sea. In 1941, the USS Indianapolis left San Francisco carrying the components of the atomic bomb, Little Boy, bound for Tinian Island. Her mission was secret, her course unguarded. After delivering the cargo, she began her return voyage through the Philippine Sea. On July 30th, at midnight, 2 Japanese torpedoes struck her hull. The explosions ripped the ship apart. She sank in 12 minutes, too fast for distress calls to reach command. 900 men went into the water. For 5 days they drifted, burned by sun, dehydrated, delirious. Then came the sharks. The ocean around them turned red. Only 316 survived when rescue finally arrived. The Indianapolis is often remembered for its horror, but what remains most chilling is not the tragedy, it's the aftermath. For decades, no one could find her. The coordinates were lost. The depth was unknown. In 2017, a team led by billionaire explorer Paul Allen discovered the wreck at over 18,000 feet beneath the sea. The sonar image showed her broken in two, but still upright, her nameplate gleaming faintly through the darkness. The ocean had made her into a cathedral. It was as if all that suffering had crystallized into stillness. The water had taken, but it had also preserved. A reminder that even in war, the sea is not an enemy. It is the final witness. War leaves behind more ghosts than any storm. The Yamato, the pride of the Japanese fleet and the largest battleship ever built, met a similar fate. On April 7, 1945, as Japan faced inevitable defeat, the Yamato was sent on a one-way mission to Okinawa, carrying over 3,000 men. American aircraft intercepted her and unleashed a torrent of torpedoes and bombs. The ship exploded so violently that witnesses miles away saw a mushroom cloud rising from the sea. In moments, she was gone. When divers found her decades later, they said it looked like a mountain split in half, her steel twisted into coral gardens, her gun turrets colonized by fish. Nature had turned destruction into sculpture. Every wreck becomes an ecosystem, a living archive. On the floor of the Pacific, ships from both world wars now bloom with color. Anemones clinging to rusted bolts, sea fans spreading across bulkheads, schools of fish moving through shattered bridges. To the ocean, human conflict is just raw material for renewal. But for us, these underwater ruins are more than biology. They are emotion fossilized in salt. Each bolt and plate carries the imprint of fear, duty, and the relentless human need to keep moving forward even when the map ends. In 1942, the SS President Coolidge, a luxury liner turned troopship, struck American mines while entering the harbor of Espiritu Santo in the South Pacific. The captain ordered everyone to abandon ship, but refused to leave until he was certain all had escaped. The vessel sank gently, settling on her side near the shore. Today, divers swim through her grand hallways, still lined with chandeliers and porcelain dishes, a ballroom frozen in blue. Inside one of the cargo holds lies a famous relic, a statue known as the Lady, depicting a woman holding a unicorn, now draped in coral and sediment. Divers leave offerings before her, coins, tokens, sometimes flowers sealed in waterproof bags. They say she watches over the dead. Wreck diving has become a kind of secular pilgrimage where exploration blends with reverence. Each descent is an act of communion with the past. The deeper one goes, the quieter the world becomes until all that's left is the sound of breathing. In that silence, it's easy to believe the ocean itself remembers. Every explosion, every sinking, every scream swallowed by depth. And maybe it does. Water carries sound farther than air. If memory could have a medium, it would sound like the low frequencies that echo through the deep. The stories are not confined to war. Nature, too, continues to assert its dominion. In 2014, a Canadian expedition found the remains of the HMS Erebus and, later, the HMS Terror, the two ships of Sir John Franklin's doomed Arctic expedition of 1845. Both had vanished while searching for the Northwest Passage. For centuries, their disappearance was a symbol of hubris, men of science and empire undone by a world they could not tame. But when the ships were finally found, remarkably preserved in Arctic waters, they offered a more complicated story. Tools were still neatly arranged, dishes still sat on tables. It was not arrogance that killed them, but endurance pushed too far. The ice had simply outlasted them. Every discovery like this rewrites history. It reminds us that the past isn't buried, it's submerged, waiting for patience to find it. In 2019, researchers scanning the Baltic Sea discovered what may be the oldest intact shipwreck in the world. A Greek trading vessel over 2,400 years old, lying perfectly preserved, its mast still upright, its rudder in place. The oxygen-poor water had kept it untouched since the days of Plato. When scientists studied its design, they realized it matched a drawing found on ancient pottery, a shape humans had imagined but never seen. In that moment, myth became real. It's tempting to see these discoveries as triumphs of modern technology, proof that we can finally conquer the sea's secrets. But each one also deepens the mystery. The more we find, the more we realize how much has vanished beyond reach. Every sonar scan reveals shadows that might be ships or might be nothing. Every expedition ends with new questions. How many vessels lie beyond our instruments? How many stories will never surface? The sea keeps its ratio, one truth for every 100 silences. In the Indian Ocean, near the coast of Mauritius, divers have recently uncovered the remnants of wooden piers and stone foundations beneath 20 feet of water. Preliminary studies suggest they may date back thousands of years, evidence of settlements before sea levels rose after the last ice age. Some speculate it could be part of a forgotten civilization, perhaps connected to the myths of Lemuria or Mu. Others dismiss it as natural formations shaped by waves. But standing over those stones, feeling the pull of the current and the hum of the sea, it's hard not to wonder. If cities once stood here, what else lies below, beyond the reach of our lights? There's a strange irony in how we search for the past underwater while neglecting the lessons above it. Every wreck tells the same story: human ambition outpacing humility. The Titanic was the most advanced ship of its age, deemed unsinkable until an iceberg reminded us otherwise. A century later, we still repeat that pattern, building higher, faster, deeper, believing knowledge alone grants control. Yet every discovery proves the opposite. The ocean doesn't care about our intelligence or intention. It rewards respect, not mastery. And still, we keep sending ships. The Titan submersible, lost in 2023 while descending to the Titanic wreck, was supposed to be a triumph of private exploration. Instead, it became another entry in the ocean's endless ledger. The implosion was instantaneous, the pressure absolute. Once again, technology met reality, and reality won. The irony was brutal. Those who sought to touch history became part of it. There is a line that connects all these moments, from the Yamato to the Titan: the desire to face the unknown. It is the same desire that drove ancient mariners to sail beyond sight of land, that made Franklin march into the ice, that sent Shackleton across the world's edge. The line never breaks. It just changes shape. Some chase glory, others knowledge, others redemption. But all are pulled by the same current, toward that eternal horizon where light meets darkness and the sea decides what to remember. When we look at sonar images of wrecks today, we are not just seeing lost ships. We are seeing portraits of our own reflection. Each one captures a moment when humanity reached too far, loved too deeply, or fought too long. They are the fossils of our will. And as strange as it sounds, there's comfort in knowing they're still there, resting in the dark, unforgotten. Because in some way, that means we are still there too. Perhaps that's why the idea of the ghost ship never fades. It's not a myth of fear, but of continuity. It tells us that even when the storm takes everything, something always survives: the hull, the memory, the story. The ocean's silence is not emptiness, it's listening. The wrecks that line the seafloor are not graves, they are altars. And every time we dive or dream or tell their stories, we offer a prayer, not for the dead, but for the living, that we may remember what it means to sail into the unknown and still believe in return. Because in the end, the ocean doesn't separate the past from the present. It binds them. Beneath its waves, the Indianapolis still gleams, the Erebus still waits, the Titanic still whispers through its halls of glassy ice. Together, they form a chorus of human persistence, a song written in pressure and darkness, echoing upward through miles of salt water until it reaches us, faint but unmistakable. It says what the sea has been saying since the beginning. Everything that sinks is not lost. Some things only rest until we are ready to see them again. The ocean never gives up its secrets easily. Even now, in an age of satellites and sonar, vast stretches of it remain as unknown as distant planets. Beneath those uncharted depths lies a kind of history that doesn't belong to any one civilization. It belongs to the planet itself. Every ridge, every trench, every buried ruin is a memory of a world that once was. And sometimes, when the tides of coincidence and discovery align, that world resurfaces long enough to remind us that the line between myth and reality was never very clear to begin with. In 1968, a photograph taken off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas seemed to show a pattern of giant stone blocks stretching across the seabed. To some, it looked like a natural formation, carved by the movement of water and sand over thousands of years. But to others, it was unmistakable. The remains of an ancient road, part of a lost city swallowed by the sea. The Bimini Road, as it came to be called, ignited one of the modern world's most enduring mysteries. Was this the first physical proof of Atlantis? The timing was too perfect to ignore. Only 2 years earlier, the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce had predicted that evidence of Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas by 1968 or 1969. When divers and researchers stumbled upon those massive stones, the prophecy seemed fulfilled. Newspapers called it Atlantis Found. Scientists rolled their eyes. The blocks, they explained, were naturally fractured limestone, shaped by tidal forces, but the photographs told a different story. Lines too straight, edges too deliberate, and the human imagination did the rest. The legend of Atlantis has always thrived on ambiguity. Plato's dialogues describe it as a vast, advanced civilization destroyed by the gods for its arrogance, an island nation that sank in a single day and night of misfortune. For centuries, scholars have argued whether his account was history or allegory. The details are maddeningly precise, yet hopelessly vague. He places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know as the Strait of Gibraltar. But he also describes features that match no known geography: mountains of impossible height, plains as wide as continents, canals deeper than any built until the modern age. Some historians say he based it on memories of real disasters: the eruption of Thera, the fall of Minoan Crete, or even older civilizations erased by rising seas after the last ice age. Others insist he invented it as a moral parable about the corruption of power. But what if both were true? Myths often begin with facts so extraordinary that people can only preserve them through story. The flood myths of Mesopotamia, the deluge of the Bible, the submergence of Dwarka in India, the sinking of Mu in the Pacific, all tell the same tale: a world wiped clean, Civilizations drowned, survivors scattered. In that pattern, Atlantis is not unique. It is archetypal. It represents an idea too deep to die, the idea that humanity has lived and fallen many times before. Across the globe, underwater ruins echo that same refrain. In the Bay of Cambay, off India's western coast, sonar scans in 2001 revealed symmetrical structures, long walls, and even what appeared to be streets, 9 kilometers wide, under 40 meters of water. Carbon dating from recovered artifacts suggested they might be over 9,000 years old, older than the Egyptian pyramids. Critics argue the evidence is inconclusive. Still, the imagery is haunting. Temples, steps, stone rings buried in silt, hinting at a civilization erased by the melting of Ice Age glaciers. Then there's Yonaguni, near Japan's Ryukyu Islands. In 1986, a diver exploring the seabed stumbled upon what looked like a staircase carved into the rock. As he swam deeper, he saw terraces, columns, and flat surfaces intersecting at perfect right angles. Geologists initially dismissed it as a natural formation shaped by erosion. But others, like marine archaeologist Masaki Kimura, believed it was man-made, perhaps the remains of an ancient city that existed before Japan's recorded history. Yonaguni's monument, as it came to be called, sits 40 feet underwater, its edges too clean, its symmetry too deliberate to feel accidental. When divers shine their lights across its steps, the structure glows like a forgotten ziggurat. Some call Yonaguni the Japanese Atlantis. Others think it's part of something even larger, a chain of lost lands that once stretched across the Pacific, connecting Japan, Polynesia, and Easter Island. They call it Mu, or Lemuria, depending on the storyteller. The idea of a lost Pacific continent first emerged in the 19th century when naturalists tried to explain how identical species of lemurs existed in both Madagascar and India. They imagined a submerged land bridge between them. The science was wrong, but the image stuck, a drowned paradise beneath endless waves. The theosophists of the early 20th century turned it into spiritual doctrine. Mu was humanity's cradle, its fall the first apocalypse. Modern researchers scoff at such notions, yet the ocean keeps offering strange reminders that not everything has been explained. Off the coast of Cuba, in 2001, oceanographers using sonar to map the seafloor stumbled upon something they couldn't categorize: massive geometric shapes, aligned in grid-like patterns nearly 700 meters below the surface. The formations were so deep they couldn't have been exposed in any known era of human civilization. Still, the patterns resembled architecture: pyramids, roads, and circular plazas. The discovery was quietly shelved, dismissed as sonar error or optical illusion. But for those who believe the sea hides our true prehistory, it was another clue, a whisper from a forgotten world. When we imagine these submerged ruins, what we're really imagining is the fragility of memory. The ocean doesn't destroy everything, it transforms it. The pillars of temples become coral spires. Statues turn into reefs. Roads become habitats for fish. The past doesn't vanish. It evolves into something else, something living. And when divers descend into those blue cathedrals of stone, they are not just archaeologists. They are witnesses to that transformation, to the way time itself changes form beneath the surface. Still, the deeper question lingers. Why do these stories refuse to die? Why does every generation rediscover Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, and the rest, even when science offers more modest explanations? Perhaps it's because the ocean embodies what we've lost, not just civilizations, but certainty itself. On land, history feels solid. We can walk its ruins, read its inscriptions, measure its progress. But underwater, everything is fluid, ambiguous. A city can look like a reef. A prophecy can feel like science. The unknown becomes a mirror for whatever we most desire to find, proof that we are not the first, or hope that we won't be the last. The poet W.H. Auden once wrote that the sea is the great leveler, but it's also the great equalizer of myths. Beneath its waves, time collapses. Bronze Age temples rest beside World War submarines. Coral grows on cannons, whales pass over pyramids. The ocean is not linear, it's cyclical. It remembers everything at once. Some scientists now believe entire stretches of continental shelf, submerged between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago, were once home to thriving human cultures. As ice melted, sea levels rose more than 400 feet, swallowing coastlines that had been centers of trade and life. If that's true, then every myth of a flood, from Noah to Gilgamesh to Atlantis, is not fantasy, but collective memory. Imagine thousands of villages, cities, and shrines disappearing beneath rising water. Imagine generations later, survivors telling their children, "Once there was land here." Over time, memory became myth, and myth became warning. Modern exploration may one day confirm or refute these stories. But even if we find no golden spires, no Atlantean machines, the truth may be stranger still. That our species has always lived on borrowed time, building civilizations on the edges of shifting tides. Perhaps we are not descendants of Atlantis, but builders of its next version, destined to sink again when the Earth resets its balance. At night, when research vessels drift above the dark abyss, their lights barely piercing the black water, it's easy to feel that ancient awe returning. The ocean beneath them is a world without horizon or sound, full of shapes we can sense but never see. Each beep of sonar, each flicker of reflection feels like a heartbeat from another age. And when divers emerge from those depths, their voices tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. They have seen something older than history, something that erases the illusion of time. Whether we call it Atlantis or Bimini, Dwarka or Mu, the name doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling, the quiet realization that the sea's memory is longer than ours, and that everything we build will one day belong to it. Our skyscrapers will be reefs, our monuments, sea glass, our digital maps, forgotten pixels. The ocean will smooth it all into silence, leaving behind only fragments for the next explorers to misinterpret. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the purpose of these lost worlds is not to prove that we came from greatness, but to remind us how easily greatness can drown. The waves have been telling us this story for millennia. We just keep pretending not to hear. Yet each time we lower a camera into the abyss and glimpse the ghost of a structure that shouldn't exist, something in us stirs. A memory that doesn't belong to any one of us, but to all of us. It whispers that the ocean is not just water. It is the archive of our forgotten beginnings. And somewhere, far below, where light no longer reaches, the first stones of every lost city still rest. Patient, enduring, waiting for us to remember their names. There is a point where exploration turns into haunting, where the search for knowledge becomes indistinguishable from the longing to find ourselves in what the world has forgotten. The sea has always been the stage for that longing, and nowhere is it more profound than in the silent depths of the Mediterranean, a body of water so saturated with history that even its waves seem to whisper in dead languages. Beneath this sea, whole civilizations have vanished, their ruins scattered across the continental shelf like breadcrumbs left for the curious. Here, myth and reality do not oppose each other. They blend layer upon layer like silt settling over centuries. And the deeper we dive, the more it feels as though we are descending through time itself. Near the coast of Alexandria, Egypt, lies one of the most haunting examples of this. The lost city of Heracleion, once a thriving port where traders, priests, and pharaohs met the tides of empire. For centuries, it was only a rumor mentioned by Greek historians and dismissed by archaeologists as legend. But in 2000, marine archaeologist Frank Godio found it, intact, submerged beneath 30 feet of water. When his divers first brushed the sand away, they uncovered colossal statues, temple columns, and hieroglyphs still sharp enough to read. It was as if the city had fallen asleep under the waves. Heracleion wasn't destroyed by a single cataclysm. It was undone slowly by rising seas, earthquakes, and the gradual liquefaction of the delta beneath it. Over centuries, the ground itself gave way, swallowing stone by stone. What remains today is eerily peaceful. Massive statues of Egyptian gods, faces serene and unbroken, staring into the endless blue. Divers glide past them as if swimming through a dream, the light filtering down in golden shafts that make the ruins glow like stained glass. Among the discoveries were coins from Greece, ceramics from Phoenicia, and jewelry from Nubia, evidence of a crossroads civilization that had connected 3 continents. Finding Heracleion changed the way we think about the ancient world. It reminded us that the sea doesn't just erase, it archives. It holds what we lose, wrapping it in salt and time until we are ready to find it again. But it also made people wonder how many other cities lie waiting, still unseen. Off the coast of Israel, researchers have found Atlit Yam, a Neolithic settlement 9,000 years old, preserved under 12 meters of water. There, in the stillness of the Mediterranean, stand circular stone dwellings, wells, and even human skeletons, their bones arranged in quiet repose. Some still wear shell ornaments. It is the oldest known example of a complete underwater village, a place where people once lived, farmed, and built altars to gods we no longer remember. When scientists examined the seabed around Atlit Yam, they found evidence of a massive tsunami, triggered by a volcanic eruption in the Aegean. The wave had swept across the coast, destroying everything in its path. For generations afterward, survivors must have told their children the story of the sea that rose to devour their world. Thousands of years later, those stories became myths, the kind that would echo in the flood tales of Mesopotamia or in Plato's account of Atlantis. In that sense, archaeology doesn't destroy myth, it decodes it. Further west, in the Aegean Sea, lies another drowned memory, the island of Thera, now called Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, it erupted in one of the most powerful volcanic events in human history, shattering itself and sending walls of ash and fire into the sky. The explosion triggered tsunamis that reached Crete, nearly destroying the Minoan civilization. For centuries afterward, people spoke of an island swallowed by the sea, its people punished by the gods. The parallels to Atlantis are impossible to ignore. In the ruins of Akrotiri, buried beneath volcanic ash, archaeologists found frescoes of dolphins, flowers, and blue monkeys, paintings of a world that vanished in an instant, preserved with such clarity it feels like time folded over itself. But not all ruins under the sea are ancient. Some belong to an age we can still remember. During the 20th century, as coastlines expanded and technology reshaped the world, whole towns were intentionally drowned in the name of progress. In Italy, Spain, Canada, and the United States, valleys were flooded to create reservoirs, forcing communities to relocate. Their churches, houses, and streets now lie under still water. In times of drought, they reappear like ghosts, bell towers piercing the surface, bells still intact, though they haven't rung in decades. One of the most famous is Fabbrice di Caregine in Tuscany, submerged since 1947. Every few decades, when the dam is drained for maintenance, the town reemerges from the depths, its stone buildings slick with algae, its silence heavier than any sound. People return to visit, to walk streets their grandparents once called home, as if stepping into a memory the earth itself tried to forget. These modern ghost towns mirror the ancient ones. Whether buried by time or flooded by human ambition, they tell the same story: that every civilization builds its own Atlantis sooner or later. We like to think the past is something we leave behind, but it's more accurate to say that it waits for us underwater, resurfacing when we need to be reminded of impermanence. In 2017, when divers explored Herakleion again, they discovered something that blurred the boundary between archaeology and ritual. Inside the temple of Amun-Goreb, they found dozens of offerings: amulets, gold rings, carved eyes of Horus, arranged as if they had been left there yesterday. It was as though the people of Herakleion had known what was coming and had tried to appease the sea before it took them. That act, both desperate and sacred, feels universal. From fishermen throwing coins into the water for luck, to sailors whispering to the waves before departure, humans have always treated the ocean as something sentient, a god that remembers offerings and insults alike. We keep returning to that theme: the sea as witness, judge, and confessor. Its silence isn't absence, it's listening. Maybe that's why when people dive among the ruins of Herakleion or Atlit Yam, they often describe an overwhelming sense of calm. Not fear, not even awe, just stillness. As if the ocean itself were saying, "You're home." There's another layer to this story, one that science is only beginning to understand. Beneath many submerged ruins, researchers have found traces of microorganisms that metabolize minerals in ways no surface species can. They form colonies that glow faintly in the dark, feeding off stone and metal, creating webs of phosphorescent light. Under certain conditions, these bacteria can even bloom, illuminating entire areas of seabed for a few minutes before fading again. Some divers who have witnessed it call it the breath of the deep. It's easy to see how ancient sailors might have mistaken it for magic, for spirits moving beneath their ships. But what if, in a way, they were right? What if this living light is the ocean's way of remembering? Imagine standing at the bottom of the Mediterranean, among statues of forgotten gods and altars to vanished kings, while the sea around you glows softly as if exhaling light. You would not need to believe in Atlantis to feel the truth of its myth. You would understand that civilizations are not defined by how long they last, but by what they leave behind in the water. And as we continue to explore, we begin to see a pattern not of destruction, but of rhythm. The sea takes and returns, in an endless exchange. Every lost city becomes coral, every drowned ship becomes sanctuary. The ocean erases our names but keeps our shapes, turning history into habitat. It's a kind of mercy, perhaps, the only kind it knows. One day, when sea levels rise again, as they inevitably will, our coastal cities, Venice, New York, Alexandria, will join the others. Future divers will swim through skyscrapers the way we now swim through temples, and they will speculate about us. Were we gods? Were we fools? Were we both? The answer will depend on how we lived and how much we learned from the ruins beneath us. The Mediterranean, with all its shipwrecks and submerged empires, is more than a sea. It's a prophecy written in salt. It tells us that nothing built on water lasts forever, and yet everything we build returns there eventually. It's a reminder that the world itself is tidal, that creation and loss are not opposites but partners. The ocean is not just a graveyard of civilizations. It's their afterlife, carrying their echoes into eternity. Perhaps that's why every diver who descends into the ruins of Heraklion or the dark corridors of a wreck feels a strange familiarity. They are not discovering something new. They are remembering something ancient, the feeling of being both fragile and eternal, of belonging to a cycle that began before history and will outlast it. And when they rise back to the surface, the air feels thinner, the sunlight sharper, as though they've glimpsed not just the past, but the shape of the future reflected in the deep. Because in the end, the sea doesn't differentiate between ancient and modern, sacred and forgotten. It keeps everything. The Mediterranean's floor is a mirror showing us what happens when power meets water, when pride meets time, when memory meets the abyss. And maybe that's why we keep diving, to keep listening, to keep remembering, to learn once more what every drowned world has already learned. That to be human is to be temporary, and to be remembered by the sea is the only eternity we'll ever truly know. There is a moment somewhere between descent and darkness when sound disappears. The ocean no longer roars or breathes, it hums. The deeper one goes, the slower time feels. Colors vanish, then warmth, then everything familiar. What's left is pressure and pulse, the Earth's heartbeat vibrating through water. Down here, in the lightless trenches that cut through the planet's crust, the idea of lost takes on a different meaning. Ships do not simply vanish. They are consumed by depth, drawn into an underworld that few have ever seen. Yet, within this realm of perpetual night, life thrives, and perhaps something else endures, the memory of everything the sea has taken. The Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, descends nearly 7 miles beneath the Pacific. Its silence is older than language, its darkness older than light. The first humans to reach its bottom were Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh in 1960, aboard a spherical bathyscaphe called Trieste. They spent 20 minutes at the bottom, seeing nothing but sediment stirred by their arrival. When they returned to the surface, Piccard wrote, "The impression is of a dream, and the dream is that we were never meant to be here." Since then, only a handful of explorers have followed. Most of what we know about the trench comes from machines, autonomous submersibles equipped with cameras that transmit brief glimpses before vanishing into static. Those glimpses, however, have changed everything. We used to believe the deep sea was barren, lifeless. Now we know it's teeming with existence. Translucent shrimp, luminous jellyfish, worms that glow like candles in the abyss. There are creatures that generate their own light, organisms that feed on sulfur instead of sunlight, and even bacteria that thrive on the heat of volcanic vents. The discovery of these life forms in such hostile conditions has forced scientists to reconsider what possible means. If life can exist here, in crushing pressure and eternal darkness, then where else might it hide? Beneath the frozen oceans of Europa or the methane seas of Titan. The deep sea, it turns out, may be less an alien world than a mirror of every other ocean in the universe. And yet, there are things found in those depths that raise questions no one is ready to answer. In 1997, hydrophones operated by NOAA recorded a strange, ultra-low sound off the southern Pacific coast. It was loud enough to be detected across thousands of miles, but it matched no known natural pattern. The noise was nicknamed the bloop. At first, scientists suspected a creature, something massive, beyond anything we've ever documented. Later, the official explanation blamed shifting ice shelves. Still, those who listened to the original recordings claimed to hear a rhythm, almost like breath. They described it as something alive. Whatever it was, it came from a depth we have never reached. We like to think the ocean is mapped, that our technology can define its edges. But 80% of the seafloor remains unexplored, and what we have seen only deepens the mystery. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar images show patterns too symmetrical to be coincidence, geometric shapes that could be architecture, or illusions caused by shadow. In the Baltic, divers found a circular structure that looks like a stone monolith, with markings along its edge resembling runes. Natural formation, or relic, no one can say for certain. The deeper we look, the more the ocean resists being categorized. It's as if the planet itself has hidden its oldest memories, where light cannot follow. Some cultures believe that the ocean's deepest places are not empty, but sacred. Polynesian legends speak of Tepo, the dark realm beneath the world where spirits travel after death. The Norse called it Ran's Hall, the underwater domain of a goddess who gathers the drowned into her net. Even in modern maritime tradition, sailors talk about the deep with reverence, as though it were not merely a place, but a being. Maybe that instinct is older than reason. Maybe it's something we inherited from our ancestors who watched the horizon swallow their ships and knew the sea didn't just take, it kept. In recent years, as climate change reshapes coastlines and ice melts into the ocean, the boundary between land and water has begun to blur once more. Places once solid are becoming transient. In Indonesia, entire villages now stand half submerged. In Alaska, cemeteries slide into the sea. The process feels ancient, cyclical. The ocean is reclaiming what it once owned, and as it rises, it reveals new layers of itself. Ruins, reefs, even the bones of long-dead whales re-emerging from melting permafrost. The planet is remembering in reverse. Explorers who descend into the Hadal Zone, the ocean's deepest regions, describe the experience as otherworldly. Their lights reveal not empty wastelands, but delicate alien beauty. In 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo reached the Challenger Deep, the trench's lowest point. There, at nearly 36,000 feet, he found something no one expected: a plastic bag and a candy wrapper resting on the silt. Humanity's touch, reaching even the planet's farthest graveyard. The irony is almost mythic. We fear the ocean's secrets, yet it's now haunted by ours. It's easy to see the poetry in shipwrecks and ruins, but the truth is more complex. The ocean story isn't just about loss, it's about transformation. What sinks doesn't die, it changes. Wooden masts become coral spines, iron hulls turn into reefs. Even plastic, that symbol of our excess, becomes colonized by life. Nature wastes nothing. The sea absorbs everything, reshapes it, reuses it. In that way, it is not destruction, but reincarnation. The idea that the ocean itself might be alive isn't new. Ancient philosophers called it the world blood, the circulatory system of the earth. Modern science, in its own way, has confirmed this metaphor. Ocean currents regulate global climate, oxygenate the atmosphere, and even distribute nutrients to forests. Without the sea, there is no life. Every breath we take carries a trace of it. The ocean isn't a backdrop to our story. It is the story. Still, for all its beauty, the deep remains unsettling. There are recordings, real or imagined, of sounds that seem too structured to be geological. Rhythmic knocks, metallic pulses, bursts of infrasonic vibrations. Some say they are echoes from tectonic movement. Others think they are remnants of sunken machinery, or relics of lost experiments swallowed decades ago. The truth, as always, is buried under miles of water. And perhaps that's what fascinates us most. The ocean is the last place where mystery still feels infinite. On land, we've charted every mountain, mapped every desert, even catalogued the stars. But beneath the waves, the unknown persists. We can measure its pressure, but not its silence. We can see its floor, but never its depth. Each new discovery, an ancient city, a ghost ship, a species that glows in total darkness, reminds us that we are guests here, not masters. There's a theory among some marine biologists that the sea itself might record sound in the same way trees record age. Layer upon layer of vibration stored in mineral form, waiting for the right frequency to release it. If that were true, then the ocean would be the oldest archive on Earth, a living memory of everything that has ever touched it. Imagine if we could listen. The rumble of shifting continents, the chants of vanished temples, the last words of sailors lost to storms. The sea doesn't forget. It stores. And when you think of it that way, the concept of ghost ships begins to change meaning. Maybe they are not supernatural at all. Maybe they are echoes, memories projected by the ocean itself, reminders of what it has absorbed. Light refracted through salt, sound refracted through time. Perhaps that's why they appear and disappear, why no one can find them twice. The ocean is showing us its memories, but only for a moment, before closing the curtain again. Late at night, when the surface is calm and the horizon glows faintly with the moon, you can almost hear it. The long, low vibration beneath the wind. Some say it's just the movement of waves, but it feels older than that. It feels like language, one we've forgotten how to speak. Every age has looked into the sea and seen its own reflection. The ancients saw gods, the explorers saw glory, the modern world sees data. But beneath all those interpretations lies the same truth. The ocean does not belong to us. We belong to it, our histories, our myths, our bones, and our machines. All of it will end up here, eventually. We are temporary, and the sea is forever. Perhaps that's why every time a new wreck is discovered, every time a diver touches a stone carved by hands long gone, it feels less like discovery and more like reunion. We're not uncovering the unknown. We're remembering. We're reuniting with the part of ourselves that has always lived beneath the surface, in silence, in darkness, in depth. Because the ocean, for all its terror and majesty, is not just a place of endings. It's the beginning, too, the cradle of life, the heart of every myth, the mirror of eternity. And though we may never reach its deepest truths, perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps mystery itself is the message. The sea doesn't need to explain, it only needs to exist. And as long as it does, we'll keep listening, diving, vanishing, and resurfacing, forever chasing our own reflection in the dark. At the edge of every story about the sea lies a mirror, the reflection of ourselves staring back through fog, salt, and memory. By the time we reach the end of this long descent through shipwrecks, lost cities, and ghostly horizons, one truth becomes clear. The ocean is not a mystery to be solved, but a truth to be accepted. It is our origin and our afterlife, our greatest teacher and our oldest adversary. And as humanity stands now at another threshold, facing rising seas, melting ice, and vanishing coastlines, it feels as though the stories of the past have returned, whispering warnings through the roar of waves. Every ghost ship, every drowned empire, every myth of a flood, they were not prophecies. They were memories. In a way, we are becoming the next lost civilization. Cities like Jakarta, Miami, and Venice are slowly slipping beneath the tide. In the Arctic, ice sheets that have stood for millennia now crack open like old bones. Coastal towns are moving inland, carrying with them fragments of history, stones from cathedrals, plaques from harbors, the bones of ancestors reburied farther from the shore. And yet, just like the people of Heraklion, or Dwarka, or Atlit Yam, we keep building by the water, pretending the sea will never come for us. It is a strange kind of faith, the belief that this time we will be spared. But the ocean doesn't punish, it restores balance. When glaciers melt and rivers flood, the planet is not rebelling, it is remembering its natural rhythm. We are the anomaly, the brief pause in its breathing. The sea has risen before, many times. It will do so again long after our names have vanished. To the planet, we are a single tide, one more civilization drawn out and pulled back in. Perhaps that's why the oldest myths of humanity all begin with water. The Babylonians spoke of the goddess Tiamat, whose chaos gave birth to the world. The Polynesians tell of Tangaroa, the father of seas, whose children became islands. In Hindu cosmology, Vishnu rests on the endless ocean of creation, dreaming universes into existence. And in science, we know it to be true. Every form of life began in water. The same salt that runs in our veins runs in the sea. To look at the ocean is to look at our own blood under a microscope, magnified to planetary scale. That realization is both humbling and terrifying. Because if the sea is our origin, then its memory is also ours. Every flood, every storm, every submerged ruin is a reminder of the cycle we keep reliving. Civilizations rise like waves and fall like them too, brief flashes of brilliance swallowed by the deep. It is not tragedy. It is nature's way of teaching impermanence. Yet the human heart resists that lesson. We keep searching for permanence, for something that will not dissolve. We build monuments. We carve our names in stone. We send satellites into orbit. But even in space, we carry the same blue reflection below us. The ocean never leaves. The irony is that in trying to escape its reach, we have only made it stronger. Plastic islands now drift across its surface, oil spills stain its light, and the sounds of ships and drilling echo through its depths. We've colonized even the silence. The ocean bears our fingerprints everywhere, yet still remains beyond our comprehension. We know how deep it is, how salty, how cold, but we do not know how to listen to it. There's an idea among oceanographers that the sea might be the Earth's unconscious mind, a vast repository of memory and emotion. On its surface, life flickers and vanishes, but beneath, everything is stored. The ocean holds the DNA of extinct species, the metals of meteorites, the wreckage of wars, and the whispers of ancient storms trapped in the chemistry of its water. If one could read it the way we read fossils or tree rings, it would tell the entire history of the planet in a single breath. And maybe it already does, just not in a language we understand. Sometimes, when a storm approaches, the sea grows silent moments before the wind arrives. Fishermen say it's the ocean holding its breath. Scientists call it pressure equilibrium. But to anyone who has ever stood on a shore in that strange stillness, it feels like something deeper. A pause between heartbeats, between worlds. The same stillness fills the air at shipwreck sites, or over drowned cities like Heracleon, or near the edges of melting ice fields where the Earth's oldest water resurfaces. It's not fear you feel in those moments. It's recognition. As if the sea is reminding you that you've been here before, in some other form, in some other age. Maybe that's why the idea of reincarnation feels so natural when we speak of the ocean. It has died and been reborn countless times, shifting between solid and liquid, between creation and collapse. In its mirror we see ourselves, not as separate beings, but as part of that same rhythm. Every breath we take is borrowed from plankton. Every drop of rain that falls once belonged to the sea. The air we call ours is just the ocean exhaled, and so the myths return, but with new meanings. Atlantis is no longer just a legend of punishment. It's a metaphor for our arrogance. Mu and Lemuria are no longer places. They're symbols of lost wisdom, the knowledge we once had about how to live with the planet rather than against it. Even the ghost ships drifting through fog begin to sound like messages rather than mysteries. They are warnings written in steel and salt. This is what happens when you forget where you came from. Yet there is beauty in that forgetting too, because it allows rediscovery. It gives meaning to the act of searching. When archaeologists pull statues from the seabed, when divers find temples beneath coral reefs, they are not just uncovering history, they are rehearsing resurrection. Every artifact brought to light is a defiance of oblivion. Every name restored from ruin is a victory against time. That's what the sea teaches us, that loss is not final, that what disappears can return in new form. Maybe that's the true legacy of ghost ships, not horror, but hope. They remind us that even after disappearance, there can still be motion. A ship adrift is not dead, it is free. It follows currents older than humanity, carried by forces we barely comprehend. To watch one vanish into fog is to witness a ritual of return. To the cycle, to the source, to the endless exchange between what is seen and what is unseen. The greatest explorers have always understood this. Shackleton, Cousteau, Picard, they all spoke of the sea not as an adversary, but as a companion. They knew that every journey into it was also a journey inward. When Jacques Cousteau described diving into the silent blue as entering the past, he wasn't being poetic. He was describing a literal truth. Down there, sound travels differently, gravity loses its meaning, and time itself bends. You're suspended between seconds, between civilizations. You become part of the story. In the end, all these tales, the Mary Celeste, the Baychimo, the Endurance, Heraclean, Atlantis, they are chapters of the same book. Together they form a single narrative. The sea takes, the sea transforms, the sea returns, and somewhere within that rhythm we find our place. The ocean is both cradle and crypt, beginning and end. It holds the bones of our ancestors and the blueprint of our future. Every wave that breaks on a shore has traveled through centuries to reach us. It is the oldest traveler we know. When people say the ocean is vast, they usually mean distance, but its true vastness is temporal. It contains every age at once: prehistoric fish swimming past plastic debris, coral growing over statues of gods, sonar bouncing off Roman amphorae beside Dwaditopthu submarines. To dive is to fall through layers of time stacked atop one another, to witness history without sequence. It's like touching eternity and realizing it's made of water. Perhaps someday, long after we're gone, someone, or something, will stand on a new shore, watching the waves crash over the ruins of our cities. They will see fragments of bridges, skyscrapers turned to coral, satellites buried in sediment. And they will tell stories about us, the way we tell stories about Atlantis or the Minoans or the ships that vanished without trace. They will call us a mystery. They will say we once reached for the stars but forgot to look beneath our feet. And in their retelling, maybe they'll understand what we never did, that the sea was never against us. It was trying to teach us how to last. As the tide pulls back and the horizon begins to fade into mist, one can almost hear the echo of those lessons, the slow heartbeat of the world beneath the noise. The ocean does not end. It only waits. Every ship that sails, every city that falls, every myth that begins with water, they all return here, to silence, to motion, to memory. So if there's any conclusion to this story, it's this: the ocean is not haunted. We are. Haunted by what we've forgotten, by the civilizations we've drowned, by the futures we're still building on sand. But the sea forgives easily. It takes us back every time. It has no grudge, no agenda, only gravity. Listen closely, and you can still hear it calling from beyond the shore, in the language of waves and wind. Come back, it says. Come back to where you began. The water remembers. The story is not over. Welcome once again to Deformed History.